In a dramatic escalation of the ongoing trade tensions between the United States and China, Chinese officials have issued a resolute declaration vowing to fight to the end against President Donald Trump's latest threat to impose additional tariffs on Chinese imports. This statement follows Trump's announcement that he would implement an additional 50% tariff on Chinese goods unless Beijing rescinds its own retaliatory tariffs. This unfolding narrative of economic confrontation is not merely a clash of numbers. It represents a complex interplay of national pride, global influence, and economic strategy. On April 8, 2025, just hours after Trump's announcement, Lin Jian, spokesperson for the Chinese Foreign Ministry, accused the U.S. of engaging in economic bullying. The stakes are high, as Goldman Sachs has estimated that if Trump's tariffs are enacted, the effective U.S. tariff rate on Chinese goods could reach an eye-watering 110%. In comparison, China's tariffs on American products would stand at about 70%, significantly intensifying the already fraught economic relationship between the two largest economies in the world. The tough rhetoric from Beijing underscores a critical dilemma for President Xi Jinping. On one hand, Xi has built his political image around the concept of national rejuvenation. To yield under pressure from Trump would not only undermine his authority domestically but could also embolden dissent within the Chinese Communist Party. Analysts suggest that Xi's administration is trapped in a zero-sum game where any sign of weakness could be politically catastrophic. Julian Gewertz, a former senior U.S. policy official, noted Beijing's response to date has emphasized three things: resolve, resilience, and retaliation. This suggests that any concessions to the U.S. could be viewed as a betrayal of Xi's narrative of strength. The implications of this escalating trade war extend beyond mere tariffs and trade balances. Economists have long warned that a full-blown trade conflict could have devastating global repercussions. As stock markets worldwide react to these developments, the potential for a recession looms large. Recent declines in global markets reflect investor anxiety about the protracted nature of U.S.-China relations, with many fearing that Trump's approach could trigger a broader economic downturn. China's strategic calculations also indicate that they anticipate a clash with the Trump administration as inevitable. Trump's tariffs have targeted not only China but also other countries, including Vietnam and Thailand, where Chinese companies have relocated production to evade earlier U.S. tariffs. This broader strategy reinforces China's view that the U.S. is intent on obstructing its rise as a global power. Ryan Haas, director of the John L. Thornton China Center at the Brookings Institution, commented, "At best, they believe it would merely postpone America's determination to destroy China's economy." In response to the tariffs, Beijing has indicated a willingness to negotiate but firmly rejects any discussions under duress. The Chinese government's refusal to entertain negotiations without a lifting of tariffs reflects a broader strategy to maintain its sovereignty and economic integrity. Xi's administration has also sought to strengthen ties with other countries in an attempt to mitigate the impact of U.S. tariffs, showcasing its commitment to expanding trade partnerships beyond the American sphere. Amid these tensions, the prospect of a face-to-face meeting between Xi and Trump appears increasingly unlikely. While Trump has expressed openness to dialogue, Chinese officials remain hesitant to engage without preconditions, fearing that any talks could be used as leverage against them in a politically charged atmosphere. The looming trade war is not merely a transactional dispute, it represents a significant shift in global power dynamics. As Xi prepares for potential diplomatic engagements with Southeast Asian nations, the Chinese narrative frames these tariffs as a reckless gamble by the U.S. that could destabilize not only the Chinese economy but the global economy as a whole. Beijing's messaging has emphasized its resilience and self-reliance, bolstered by technological advancements in sectors such as artificial intelligence. As the situation develops, the world watches closely, with both nations entrenched in their positions. The potential for a resolution seems distant. The strategic implications of this trade war will likely reverberate through international markets and geopolitical alliances for years to come. The outcome of this confrontation may redefine economic relationships and influence the course of global politics as nations navigate the complexities of a new multipolar world. As tensions escalate between the United States and China, the world watches closely to see how the two largest economies will navigate the storm of tariffs and trade disputes. In a striking display of defiance, Chinese officials have vowed to fight to the end against recent threats from President Donald Trump, who is contemplating raising tariffs on Chinese imports to an unprecedented 50%. This latest chapter in the ongoing trade war highlights not only the economic stakes involved but also the political ramifications for both nations. The roots of this confrontation lie in a long-standing trade imbalance, with the United States importing a staggering $440 billion worth of goods from China in the previous year against just $144 billion in exports. This disparity has fueled Trump's aggressive tariff strategy aimed at reshaping the dynamics of international trade in favor of American manufacturing. However, Beijing has responded with equal tenacity, labeling the U.S. tactics as blackmail and asserting that capitulation is not an option for its leadership. Lin Jian, a spokesman for the Chinese Foreign Ministry, has described the U.S. approach as economic bullying, underscoring the resolve within the Chinese government to resist external pressures. Analysts suggest that President Xi Jinping's political survival hinges on maintaining a strong image of leadership amid these challenges. As Julian Goertz, a former U.S. policy official, explains, Beijing's response has emphasized three things: resolve, resilience, and retaliation. This sentiment reflects Xi's narrative of rejuvenating China's national pride, complicating any potential concessions. The implications of these developments extend far beyond the borders of the two nations. As tariffs threaten to soar, potentially reaching an overall rate of 104% on certain goods, the global economy braces for impact. Economists warn that a full-blown trade war could have devastating effects not only on Chinese exporters but also on American consumers, who may face higher prices for a range of everyday goods from electronics to clothing. Moreover, the uncertainty surrounding these tariffs has prompted a ripple effect in global markets. Asian stock indices have experienced significant volatility, with investors reacting to the possibility of further escalation. Companies that rely on Chinese imports are already feeling the strain as margins tighten and supply chains become increasingly disrupted. As Mary Lovely, a trade expert at the Peterson Institute, notes, we've stopped talking about any sense of gain. It's a game of who can bear more pain. China's strategic response to Trump's threats has included a mix of retaliatory tariffs and measures designed to stabilize its economy. The Chinese government has allowed the yuan to weaken, making its exports more competitive, while state-backed enterprises have intervened in the stock market to bolster investor confidence. At the same time, Beijing remains open to dialogue, but only on terms that do not appear to concede to U.S. demands. The geopolitical implications of this standoff are profound, with signs that the conflict may further isolate the U.S. on the global stage. China seeks to bolster its influence by expanding trade partnerships throughout Asia and beyond. Reports indicate that she plans to visit several Southeast Asian nations, potentially solidifying alliances that counterbalance U.S. influence in the region. As the situation unfolds, the potential for a meeting between Xi and Trump appears increasingly unlikely. Despite Trump's claims of openness to dialogue, Chinese officials are wary of engaging without a framework that ensures mutual respect. The stakes are high, and both nations are aware that any misstep could lead to a destabilizing escalation, one that could disrupt not only their economies but also the intricate web of global trade. Looking ahead, the world waits with bated breath to see how this high-stakes game of tariff diplomacy will play out. While both sides may be unwilling to back down, the broader implications for international trade and economic stability remain uncertain. As experts continue to analyze the situation, it is clear that the ramifications of this trade war will be felt for years to come, shaping the future of global commerce and international relations. In an escalating trade conflict that threatens to reshape the global economic landscape, China has issued a resolute declaration of its intent to fight to the end against President Donald Trump's latest tariff threats. As the U.S. prepares to impose tariffs of up to 110% on Chinese imports, Beijing's response has been one of defiance, reflecting its determination to resist what it perceives as economic coercion. This confrontation, which has roots in complex geopolitical tensions, is poised to have significant repercussions not only for the two nations involved but for the global economy as well. The latest developments in this trade war come as Trump has amplified his stance, planning to increase tariffs on Chinese goods from an initial 34% to as much as 50% if China does not withdraw its own retaliatory tariffs. This aggressive escalation, scheduled to take effect on April 9, has prompted analysts to raise alarms about the potential for a full-scale trade war. Goldman Sachs estimates that such measures could drive the tariff rate on Chinese goods to 110%, while China's tariffs on American imports may reach approximately 70%. Amidst this tumult, President Xi Jinping has remained steadfast, asserting that China will not yield to what Beijing has labeled as blackmail. The Chinese Ministry of Commerce has characterized the U.S. strategy as economic bullying, emphasizing a narrative of resilience and resolve. This defiance is underscored by historical context. Both nations have been embroiled in a trade dispute for years, with previous tariffs implemented under Trump's administration and continued under his successor Joe Biden. The trade balance reflects a considerable deficit for the U.S., which imported $440 billion worth of Chinese goods last year compared to just $145 billion in exports to China. The stakes are particularly high given that U.S.-China trade constitutes a substantial portion of global commerce, amounting to around $585 billion in 2024. Furthermore, analysts are increasingly concerned about the ripple effects that a prolonged trade war could have on the global economy. The interconnected nature of international markets means that slowdowns in U.S. and Chinese growth could lead to global recessions, affecting economies worldwide. China's response strategy appears multifaceted. She has cultivated an image of a strongman leader who is rejuvenating China's national pride, making it politically untenable for him to concede to U.S. demands without risking his domestic legitimacy. As Julian Gewertz, a former senior U.S. policy official, explains, Xi has built up an image of himself as a defiant strongman, determined to stand up to U.S. pressure even at high costs. Moreover, China's economic landscape is characterized by its dominance in manufacturing and technology. The country is a key player in the supply chains for critical materials like lithium and rare earths, essential for various industries including defense. As tensions rise, there are concerns that China could leverage its control over these materials to further escalate the conflict. Beijing has already imposed restrictions on certain exports, signaling its readiness to retaliate in ways that could hurt U.S. industries reliant on these critical resources. Simultaneously, Trump has suggested that the U.S. could pressure other countries to limit trade with China, a tactic that could further complicate international relationships and impact global supply chains. The U.S. economy's reliance on Chinese manufacturing, especially for consumer electronics like smartphones, adds another layer of complexity to this situation. The prospect of 100% tariffs on these goods could lead to significant price hikes for American consumers, prompting potential backlash against the Trump administration. As both sides brace for the impending tariffs, the immediate future remains uncertain. While some analysts argue that China may be better positioned to endure prolonged economic pain than the U.S., the reality is that a full-blown trade war could inflict substantial damage on both economies. The potential for retaliatory measures and the disruption of established trade relationships could lead to widespread economic instability. Looking ahead, the possibility of constructive dialogue between the U.S. and China appears increasingly remote. As the stakes continue to rise, both nations are likely to remain entrenched in their positions, with each side unwilling to appear weak. The broader implications of this trade war will not only reshape U.S.-China relations but could also alter the dynamics of global trade for years to come. With both nations at a crossroads, the outcome of this confrontation could define the future of international economic policy and cooperation. As the geopolitical landscape continues to evolve, The relationship between the United States and China remains at the forefront of international discourse. With Donald Trump once again in the presidential seat, his approach to China has ignited both hope and concern among analysts and policymakers alike. While some view his renewed focus on personal diplomacy with Chinese President Xi Jinping as a potential avenue for cooperation, others warn that it could lead to serious pitfalls that threaten America's strategic competitiveness and global stability. Historically, the U.S. has maintained a bipartisan consensus regarding China, viewed primarily as a strategic competitor. This sentiment was notably expressed in the 2017 National Security Strategy and echoed in speeches by key figures such as former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. These documents characterize China as an adversary, particularly highlighting President Xi as a Marxist-Leninist autocrat with aspirations of global dominance. Ironically, the most significant divergence from this narrative comes from Trump himself, who, despite acknowledging China's status as a global power, seems to take a more transactional view focused on trade imbalances and specific grievances like the fentanyl crisis. Trump's personal rapport with Xi complicates this dynamic. He has previously referred to Xi as a dear friend and suggested that the two nations could collaboratively address global challenges. This perspective resonates with the earlier informal G2 model proposed by former National Security Advisor Zbigniew Brzezinski, which called for regular engagement between the world's two superpowers. However, as Trump prepares for a potential summit with Xi later this year, three significant pitfalls loom that could undermine U.S. interests. Firstly, Xi's cautious approach to Trump's overtures is likely informed by a long-standing understanding that U.S. policy towards China is fundamentally adversarial, regardless of who occupies the White House. The Chinese leader is acutely aware that external shocks such as the COVID-19 pandemic can rapidly shift U.S. sentiment towards a more confrontational stance. Therefore, Xi may perceive Trump's friendliness as a facade, particularly as Trump has threatened to escalate tariffs unless China addresses its trade surplus with the U.S. Secondly, while the Chinese economy faces challenges, it is undeniably stronger than it was during Trump's first term. The tariffs imposed in 2018 have pushed China towards greater self-reliance and the establishment of partnerships, particularly in the developing world. Xi is likely to drive a hard bargain in negotiations, especially regarding contentious issues like Taiwan, which is a critical concern for China. Trump's previous comments downplaying Taiwan's security and his willingness to prioritize trade deals over military commitments could embolden Xi to take more aggressive actions regarding Taiwan, potentially exacerbating regional tensions. Lastly, Trump's America First approach risks alienating U.S. allies and partners, particularly in Europe. As countries like Germany and Canada seek to reduce their economic dependence on the U.S., they may increasingly turn to China for collaboration. This shift could erode U.S. influence, as allies begin to perceive Washington as an unreliable partner. European leaders have expressed growing concerns about America's unilateral actions and its implications for global trade. Trump's tariffs have not only strained relationships with traditional allies but have also prompted discussions among partners about strengthening ties with Beijing. The question of whether Trump is prepared to defend Taiwan is particularly pressing amid these developments. Recent statements from Trump suggest a troubling ambiguity regarding U.S. commitments in the region, raising fears that he might sacrifice Taiwan's security to secure a favorable trade agreement with China. Such a perception could embolden Xi, increasing the likelihood of military aggression towards the island. As the U.S. and China navigate this complex relationship, high-level engagement will be critical. However, Trump's dismissive rhetoric towards allies and his apparent indifference to Taiwan's security may undermine his negotiating power with Xi. With the stakes higher than ever, the coming months will be pivotal in determining the trajectory of U.S.-China relations and, by extension, global security dynamics. The world watches closely as these two powers prepare to re-engage with the hope that diplomacy can prevail over conflict in an increasingly multipolar world. As the geopolitical landscape continues to shift, the relationship between the United States and China remains a focal point of global discourse, particularly with the recent resurgence of Donald Trump's administration. Trump's approach to China has drawn both attention and criticism, with experts warning of potential pitfalls that could complicate U.S. strategic competitiveness and global security. During his first term, Trump played a significant role in fostering a bipartisan consensus in the U.S. regarding China's status as a leading strategic competitor. This perception, highlighted in key documents such as the 2017 National Security Strategy, framed China not just as a rival but as a potential threat to global stability, particularly under the leadership of President Xi Jinping. Despite this, Trump's own stance appears paradoxical. While he acknowledges China's power and has long criticized it for exploiting U.S. resources, he often adopts a more personal and less confrontational approach toward Xi, whom he has referred to as a dear friend. This personal diplomacy raises concerns about how Trump perceives the broader implications of U.S.-China relations. Analysts note that while Trump may see an opportunity to reset ties with Xi, there are three critical pitfalls he must navigate. Firstly, Xi's cautious approach to Trump's overtures could stem from a belief that any diplomatic opening might be fleeting. The Chinese leader remains acutely aware of the broader U.S. objective to contain China's rise regardless of who occupies the White House. Trump's recent rhetoric, including threats to impose tariffs unless China addresses its trade surplus, only reinforces this adversarial backdrop. Secondly, despite current economic challenges, China has significantly bolstered its economic, military, and diplomatic capabilities since Trump first took office. The tariffs imposed during his previous term have accelerated China's efforts to achieve technological self-sufficiency and cultivate relationships, particularly within the developing world. Xi is expected to leverage these advancements during negotiations, pushing for concessions on sensitive issues like Taiwan, which remains a red line for Beijing. Indeed, Trump's remarks regarding Taiwan, often perceived as dismissive, could further embolden Xi. Should Xi interpret Trump's willingness to compromise as an opportunity to assert control over Taiwan, the implications could be dire, potentially heightening military tensions in the region. The ongoing military exercises near Taiwan by China suggest that such concerns are not unfounded. The third pitfall lies in Trump's America First philosophy, which risks alienating U.S. allies. As the U.S. adopts a more unilateral stance, European leaders have expressed increasing concern over Washington's reliability as a partner. Chinese Premier Li Qiang recently highlighted the importance of maintaining a cooperative international trade environment, contrasting it with U.S. protectionist measures. If allies perceive the U.S. as a destabilizing force, it could diminish Trump's leverage in negotiations with Xi, allowing China to expand its influence. Recent developments underscore the urgency of these concerns. Trump's threats to escalate tariffs have already rattled global markets, with the Shanghai Composite Index seeing its most significant drop since the 2008 financial crisis. China's swift retaliatory measures, including reciprocal tariffs and export controls, demonstrate the high stakes involved in this ongoing trade conflict. As Trump prepares for a possible summit with Xi later this year, the need for a balanced and strategic approach to U.S.-China relations has never been more critical. While high-level engagement remains essential to avert conflict and promote cooperation on transnational issues, Trump's current trajectory could undermine these goals. Observers are left to ponder whether the lessons of the past will inform future decisions or if a new cycle of confrontation will emerge, potentially reshaping the global order in unpredictable ways. The coming months will likely reveal the extent to which diplomatic finesse can navigate the complexities of this pivotal bilateral relationship.